Hi everyone. Okay, I think we have the majority of today's attendees signed in, and I believe we're all set on our side. So let's get started. Thank you for joining our webinar today, from invitation to conversation: how to run a stress-free focus group. My name is Carol Hoyler. I am the marketing coordinator at Survey Analytics, and I'll be kicking off the webinar today. Our presenters include Jim Kitchens. He is the founder and president of the Kitchens Group, which is a leading public opinion research firm based out of Florida. We also have the president of Q-Sample with us, Rudley Raphael, who has years of experience in designing and implementing research solutions involving quantitative methodologies. And last but not least, we have our very own VP of Customer Relations at Survey Analytics, John Johnson, who is a market research leader in charge of our worldwide client relations. Okay, so what's on the agenda today? First, we'll begin with an explanation of what is quantitative and qualitative research methodologies and how and when they are typically used. Next, we'll explain the traditional in-person focus groups, how they're implemented, and touching on a few peaks and pitfalls along the way. And then we'll also briefly explain how conducting this type of traditional approach compares to actually utilizing an online focus group tool. We'll then give an introduction to certain solution tools that actually help researchers and moderators run a smooth and controlled online focus group. And now I'm going to turn over the controls here for Rudley, John, and Jim, and you can take it away, guys.
All right, thank you, Kara, and welcome everyone again, and thank you for attending this webinar. Let me take a minute to briefly mention what we do here at Q-Sample. We are a research and data collection firm that specializes in developing and managing niche panels. Some of these panels include general contractors, veterinarian, app developers, gamers, physicians, spirit drinkers, registered voters, just to name a few. As a sister company of Survey Analytics, we leverage their suite of data collection tools to develop these panels, including the online focus group module, which my colleague John Johnson will demonstrate later in this presentation. So, for the purpose of this webinar, our approach is to have a discussion with a subject matter expert, Dr. Kitchens, who have more than 25 years of experience in this field and also a guest lecturer at the University of Florida. We want him to first highlight some of his experiences in the field when conducting face-to-face focus groups and see how that compares to online focus group and whether the online approach is a better mousetrap. So anyway, to get us started, I thought I'd let Dr. Kitchens walk us through the different methodologies and the applications. They are related in some way and intertwined, and they work together. So Dr. Kitchens, looking at our first slide here and some of the bullet points that we have, what I would want you to tell our audience is walk us through why quant, why that methodology, and when should we use quantitative research?
Well, quantitative research allows you to project your results for an entire population. You're basically, when you build a sample for quantitative research, you're building a model of a set population that you want to look at, whether it's voters, whether it's consumers, whether it's people over 18 in the market, whether it's just men, whatever. You can build a model of the universe so that you can take your results and then project them out to the entire universe you need to, normally for communications reasons, to advertise, to sell your deal, to market things. This gives you a good way to get at a large number of respondents. It gives you a good way to get a lot of different pieces of data point that you need. But your purpose of both methodologies is the same. You're asking a question about what's the public opinion about X. Both methodologies are aimed at trying to understand consumers, voters, just people, whatever you're doing. So from that standpoint, they're similar. But the quantitative research, you have the ability to then project to the universe, and that's not always true with focus groups, although focus groups have their other advantages. But this gives you a large amount of data.
So would you say that quant is more of a narrow focus, trying to reach a more conclusive point?
Yeah, it does try to reach a conclusive point. The problems you can get into is the questions you're asking. Because when you start off in quantitative research, you usually assume that you know something about the topic and about the way people feel and about the way to approach something, and they don't change the questionnaire on you, or they don't flip around what you're talking about. They follow your prescribed script as you ask questions, and the biggest problem you can have is not asking the right question.
Correct. So, from a statistical analysis standpoint, how what are the challenges, if we're looking at focusing on quant or qualitative?
Well, we are now in a mode with you guys where we got together where we're doing this online. One of the real challenges is making sure that your model is correct. I guess one of the things that's happened, not shocking probably to anybody who's coming to a webinar, most people don't have landlines in their household anymore where pollsters call people. And then pollsters got into, well, we're going to call people who have cell phones. Well, we took 5,000 numbers and called them, and everybody who answered their cell phone for an unknown number was over 50 years old. You cannot find the younger voters or younger consumers very, very well with using telephones. That just doesn't work anymore. So, the challenge you've got is, do you have the resources available, the technology available to use your online panels and to reach a broad base of the consumer population?
All right. Makes sense. So there's always this, argument in the industry with regards to, I call it the chicken or the egg, which methodology comes first. My understanding is the quant comes at a later phase, but I've seen, research design where the qualitative, company may want to run a qualitative study first, and later on, what is your view or opinion on that with regards to preference in terms of what comes first?
Yeah, I think that is really a question of the research project and how much you know when you go into it. Okay. If we have, for example, we're doing politics, we know certain issues and certain things are occurring because of what's in the press, what's in public opinion, and we get after. Now, if we're doing a consumer product, we sometimes can't assume we know why people buy certain brands or want certain types of things, and we'll like to do our focus groups first. If we're dealing with an issue of public policy, we don't know how do people talk about things like the environment and land conservation. We've done a great deal of that kind of work across the country over the years, and one of our problems, which we used focus groups very well to help explain to the client, people would say, well, we need to ask them about the watershed. Well, average people didn't know what a watershed was. The people in the environmental community do. But, as we used to say, that we get in a room with a focus group and people think a watershed's what used to be behind Grandpa's house. That was, that they had no concept. And so we had to figure out, how do people talk about the environment? How do they think about it? What are the words they use, so that we could write questions that make sense for them?
Okay. So I see where you're going. Why don't we segue into the other methodology, which is qualitative research, and talk about that a little bit, how you use it in the best application for qualitative, since we're going to talk about focus group a little bit here.
Okay. One of the there's several things we do with focus groups that are very important. Um, First of all, as I was talking about, we often want to listen to the language and the language cues and the words that people use to talk about a product, a service, a policy, or something like that, and how they describe it and what their feeling is about it. We also can do a lot of looking at reactions to things like television commercials or direct mail pieces. How do people see it? What do they think of it? You have to be careful not to turn them into media critics, but basically you can see how they react, what they think of a person or a product. How does it look? What does the logo look like? They think it's easy to use. This is more subjective, but you also tend to get interactions between people, so that they will sometimes create new ideas for you within the focus group, because as they talk and they exchange ideas, it will bring out concepts you never thought about. So from that standpoint, we call it kind of mining for gold. You can come out of focus groups with some great nuggets of gold for your research that you hadn't thought about or hadn't seen, and an approach maybe that's very different.
So we would look at qualitative methodology in terms of focus group in person as best for branding, concept testing, advertisement, a website review, those type of things.
Yeah, we've even used it in when we're doing some trial consulting, looking at witnesses on tape and having people rate their credibility and talk about what kind of person they think they are, and are they trustworthy, and do you believe them? So we can get credibility measures on that too.
So here's something for you. I've been thinking about this. Often get our online groups going to replace traditional focus group. I know you've done a fair share of face-to-face focus groups.
Right.
Where do you see that going? What is the trend in the industry? And I know you've dealt with even convincing some of your colleagues in the political arena when it comes to conducting online survey, where a lot of that was conducted via phone. Where do you see online in the case of online focus group changing that landscape?
There's several ways I think it'll change it a lot. One of the things that Americans have the least time of is time. People's time is valuable. And so if they can participate in a research group on a convenience level, that is, I think, really important. So just being able to sit at your desk, sit in your home, not leave your house is important. You also, with your focus group facilities, most of your professional facilities are located in urban areas. And so what you start getting in those focus groups often is professional focus group goers. They will maybe, even if a facility says, oh, none of our people come but once every 6 months, what these people have done is they'll sign up at every facility in town, and they'll be in focus groups every week.
Right.
And so you get kind of a professional focus group goer, which you won't get with the online kind of operation. The other thing is cost. I mean, if you're doing things like we did a focus group with small businessmen, small business owners, and you have to pay them $250, $300 to come for an hour, hour and a half, because if you don't, it's not worth their time. They're not going to spend that kind of time away from their family or away from their business for less money than that. So, then you get the other thing is a geographic problem. People are not going to drive 40 miles to a focus group facility. So if you need to do a focus group in the state of Florida, you can do. If you do it online, you can have participants from all walks of life down here. You're not trying to do. We did a big referendum in Missouri back in the early '90s, and they wanted statewide focus groups, and they wound up doing like 30, 35 focus groups because they had to move them all over the state, and the cost was just incredible. So you don't have that.
So, which leads me to my next question. I know the title of our presentation earlier mentioned something about ditching the face-to-face. I think it was more of an attention grabber than us implying that. And for our research purists out there, I want to make that clarification. But having said that, what are some of the elements of the face-to-face focus group methodology that you think we absolutely cannot replace with online? Whether it's one or two.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some good things and bad things with your online. You can you cannot, of course, do product touching. That is, you can't have, unless you work out to deliver a product, like for if you're doing a beer tasting, you got to have people there to drink it. We did some clothing where people have to touch the materials, things like that. You can't do that online. But conceptually, communication-wise, idea-wise, you can do everything online that you can do in person. That there is a problem sometimes. Everybody who moderates focus groups knows this. When we get into focus groups, there are generally, we always say that there's a turkey and a cactus, and the turkey doesn't say anything and the cactus takes over and is a prick. And so we have to, trying to control the group is very difficult. It seems online you have an easier way to cut people off and get them out. Instead of we have to go in a face-to-face group and stop a group and say, pull the guy out in the hall and say, you know so much more about this, we're going to pay you to go away. And because we need to hear what all these other people say. That's something that's much easier on the online kind of thing.
Right, understood.
The other thing which you can is the subjects you can get into. People sitting face-to-face, if you're trying to deal with difficult subjects, is hard because there's things called a socially acceptable response pattern. That is, people don't, for example, want to admit they're prejudiced against anything sitting in a room full of strangers sitting 3 feet from you who you don't know and don't know anything about. And if we're conducting research, we did some stuff back in the late 80s, I guess it was, on some of the first human rights referenda that were around for open housing for everybody in the gay community could not be discriminated against. And it's much easier doing those things when people feel like they have some anonymity. The other one that's happening today is we've done some research for the marijuana industry. If you ask somebody, if you go in and ask somebody face to face, have you used a marijuana product in the last year? They're probably going to tell you no. They're not going to say, oh yeah, I broke the law this year. But what we're finding online is that the incidence of people saying they have is much higher. Because there's some level of anonymity when you're sitting at that computer versus sitting eyeball to eyeball with some stranger who's asking you questions. We find similar things on the issues like immigration. We know from our phone calls, calling into Hispanic households, even with Hispanic workers, is very difficult. They're very suspicious that it's the government or somebody looking for an aunt or uncle who may not be in the country legally but have been here 30 years. And it's very frightening for them to talk about things like immigration.
Okay.
And so those are some of the issues.
I totally agree. On the marijuana point, I would have to say the data would be a little skewed if you were in Seattle, but that's, So let's take a look at the differences in the methodologies as it relates to face-to-face and online focus group in terms of setup. I think the first 3 items here in our setup and implementation relates more to face-to-face, and the last 2 are probably online. Why don't you give us your experience with regards to your typical setup when it comes to a face-to-face focus group?
Okay, well, first of all, in many incidences, we will separate men and women.
Why is that?
Because there's a good bit of social science research that when they're sitting in a room having a conversation, that men and women will communicate differently if they're in a mixed gender group versus a same gender group. For example, men are much more likely to use profanity if they're not women in the room. But by the same token, women tend to be less dominating in a group if there's a man in the group. Men can dominate women in communication groups. And you can see women coming out and saying things in the same gender groups that they don't say in mixed gender groups because they feel safe. Women also develop relationships very quickly and almost become friends within the group. Men are much less likely to be that nice and to do that. So we do separate men and women in many, many incidences. You also sometimes have to separate age groups. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about a website or technology, people under 30 are much different than people over 60 when it comes to that. So you have to think about that and the way you set it up.
And you would be the moderator, of course.
Well, I normally moderate the men, and my wife, Elizabeth, who's a partner in our firm, does the women. And she's really the focus group expert in the firm. We argue. I'm more quantitative. She's more qualitative. So it makes a nice balance in the firm. But she would do the women's because if you have a women's group, I think it's very important to have a woman moderator.
So how much labor is involved in the setup? I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the online focus group setup, but how labor intensive is it?
It's pretty well. We have to, of course. It depends on where we are. If we've got it's either labor or money. You either have to pay a focus group facility and you have to write the screen and tell them who to get, and they have to go get them and guarantee they'll be there. Now we have done a lot of focus groups where we were not in an urban area, and we set them up in hotels and recruit them ourselves, and that is a hugely labor-intensive kind of operation. It's also scary. You never know who's going to show up.
Okay.
It's probably now you're recruiting at least 2 to 1, maybe 3 to 1 people saying they'll come to count on getting 10 or 12 people in a room. So that becomes a real stress issue. That is a stressful thing. You're always sitting around 20 minutes before the group's supposed to start saying, I wonder if anybody's going to come.
So your typical show rate, which you mentioned earlier, as far as recruitment, is 3 to 1. Yeah.
If we're doing them ourselves.
Whereas online focus group, what we've experienced is about 2 to 1. In the online methodology, I think one thing I want to note is that the moderator must be a little bit savvy when it comes to using computer technology like typing, which I think the majority of the population can do. Educate the respondents on the technology being used. There's not really a huge learning curve with regards to our platform. It's really a standard chat mechanism, which I think is, you can find on any phone or standard chat platform, Yahoo, whatever. So there's not really a steep learning curve there. So I can understand the differences. Let's step to the next slide a little bit and talk about the benefits of conducting an online focus group. I think you kind of highlight some very key points for us, and I want to walk our audience to some of the benefits that we've seen as far as what we implemented. We think it's ideal for hard-to-reach audiences. As I mentioned before, Q-Sample, we manage a number of hard-to-reach panels, and one of them as a case study is general contractors. And we had a client that came in and conducted a quant study, and after the survey, they wanted to do a focus group, but Jim often liked to mention, these people are kind of like moving jello. So we were very successful in getting these individuals to, at the completion of the survey, redirect them to the chat board, and our client, who was the moderator, was able to successfully get about 3 groups from general contractors and moderate them successfully. The next piece with regards to the benefits is that you can contact the respondents quickly. Now, as far as the format of our online focus group facility, we are getting these individuals straight from a quant survey that they just completed. We can automatically redirect these individuals to the chat group, or at the completion of the survey, in comparison to what you were talking about earlier, Jim, with regards to setting up a screener, we can ask the question right there in the survey and say, hey, we're conducting a survey, a focus group on whatever date, would you like to participate? They say yes or no. If they say yes, we branch them to a calendar and they select a time, and then we can schedule it to. So that makes it a little bit easier to contact the respondents as well. And with a quant survey, you have more individuals in the pool to select from. So the next one is what you mentioned earlier. There are a lot of sensitive topics that face-to-face you couldn't discuss. Whereas, for example, we did a focus group, online focus group, where the client was testing women care product. That in itself, I think if you were doing that face-to-face, might have been a little bit challenging. Racial issues are probably very sensitive. So I think that's one of the benefits to online focus group. The next one is it's less likely for one person to dominate the group. We've seen before where that guy is that extroverted personality type and he's the know-it-all and so forth. On our platform, we're able to mute that individual. We can kick them out without having to be physical, like being in a face-to-face focus group. So that's, to me, is probably one of the key benefits. The other items is the convenience of participating from home or office. Jim mentioned earlier that whether or my car breakdown or I'm not able to make it due to whatever that might be is really not an issue. It's like online survey. Online survey is one of the dominant form of data collection on right now, mainly because you can send a survey to an individual and that survey can be completed within minutes, or you can collect 500 to 1,000 responses in less than 2 days. I think it's the same with focus groups. Focus groups, if there was an issue with regards to replacing that individual, you could do that, I guess, within minutes. And it's a matter of sending out an email, and if that person is not available, you can just go down the list in your data file and contact another person. If they can do it, they will just simply log in and participate in the group. So the next item that I would like to talk about is how does that relate to the platform that we've developed and we'd like to showcase right now. Reason being is Qualstorm was developed mainly as a way to take someone from a quant survey and redirect them to a chat facility in the form of a focus group, and most importantly, to take that quant data and cross-references with the qualitative data. At the end of the day, from an analysis standpoint, you can see how the respondents who participated in the online focus group and correlate that information with their panel profile information or even the survey data. So if respondent X was chatting looking at the transcript, you can look at that data and say, okay, is that person male or female? How did they respond to that survey question with regards to Coca Pepsi? That's the benefits, and my colleague John Johnson will give you a bit of a visual and all the bells and whistles that are customized and embedded within Qualstorm just to see some of the benefits. So I'll pass it along to John, who can give you a little bit of idea about it.
Hey, Ridley, thanks, and thank you, Jim. Thank both of you for letting me show up to this party. It's been fun. Yeah, I do want to talk about the 7 reasons why Qualstorm, and we'll kind of go through a few of them here. And I think, Ridley, you've been a huge user of the tool, and I think you'll agree with these 7 as well. You probably have some others, and we could go on for days of the benefits, but I think you guys have highlighted a lot of those. So one of the things with Qualstorm is it's easy to implement, right? It's integrated with the Survey Analytics Enterprise platform. So, for me, when you're running a session or you're doing any type of research and you have a tool set, you really want one robust platform rather than, having so many different moving parts to have to manage and work with. So having the ability to go from survey authoring to survey deployment to branching a respondent into a group discussion and then being able to have the analysis piece of all of that rolled up together is something that's really powerful. Secondly, you want to look, and what Qualstorm has is rich features, like including the ability to schedule these sessions, to put a time limit on these sessions, to easily send out reminders for these sessions if you're not doing it right after the survey, right? So, these are the things that the tool offers. And third, audio and video, right? I mean, you want the ability to give presentations to the participants so you have something that the moderator can engage them on and push the dialogue towards. So, obviously, you can take, some subjects maybe from the survey and then talk about that in the discussion, but you can further enhance what you're doing in this live discussion by further showing collateral, presentations, video, audio, maybe you're having a discussion around a logo, so you pull up that artwork and you guys talk about it. I feel that that's very key. Moving forward from that, pop-up profile, right? Like, what do I mean by that? Well, profile. That's really the demographics. What area are they in? Male, female, age, etc. And taking that information, and you can use that information on the platform in deciding whom you want to invite to a particular discussion and session, right? So, starting from the gate, you can use that information in a healthy way to really make it effective for what you're trying to accomplish in your session. But also, at the end of this, you have that same information. So now you have your survey information, you have your discussion information, and now you have your profile information, and you can analyze all of that together, right? So for me, that is really, really very powerful and something that I think we should point out. And 5, savings and ease, right? Come on, like, we know running a real focus group this day and age is really costly. In my days in traditional research, when I was a field manager for focus groups, when we have to recruit for these groups, we had to over recruit. Most of the time, we found ourselves re-recruiting the day of because people decided not to show up. Life happens. Now we're sitting with a moderator that's sitting in a room for 2 hours doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs. It becomes very costly. So using Qualstorm, you're going to be savings. It's cost effective. But I know what people get really concerned about with technology is how easy is it to use. And as Redley said earlier, if especially on the moderator, you're going to need to be able to type fairly fast, and that's great, and most people can. And from the respondent standpoint, if you're used to, surfing the web, if you're used to posting Facebook messages, Twitter, all of those types of things, then it's going to be very, very, very easy to use. So, you want to make sure you're saving money when doing this, because if you're gonna break something, you don't want to go broke while you're trying to break it. You want to fix something and you want to save some money. So. And 6, we do have a moderator login and view. So the chat session lends itself. There is a view for the moderator, and the moderator gets a tool set, and there's also a view for the respondent, and they have a certain tool set. So there's 2 distinct views. There's 2 distinct tool sets, depending if you're the moderator or if you're the respondent, and the tool offers that, and that's awesome. And exporting capabilities. You want to be able to export the chat and the quant data together, and along with the profile information for the analysis portion. So you can start to quickly dive into that, run some analysis and start to make some decisions. And that's what the tool offers. So the top 7, what are they to me? Easy to implement, rich features, audio and video, exporting capabilities, the moderator login view, the pop-up profile, and the savings and ease of use. And let's just take a quick look at a session here. So you can see here we're in a session on game title. There's 7 participants in this session here. I'll pop out that screen. Let's see, there's Cappy here, Sarah, Brandon, Dan. I can filter these respondents, just look at their responses. Okay, so easy filtering. open them all. I can private message any of these members by hitting the mail icon here. And I can mute members, right? Awesome. So if someone becomes disruptive, or off topic, we can mute them, okay? And then here is the moderating, so I can clear the session. I have the whiteboard, which I said we can post that content. So let's pop out the whiteboard here. You see, we can go ahead and view this trailer on Call of Duty and start to, ask some follow-up questions to that, right? So really cool to post content there in the whiteboard and display, okay? And then we have tagging, okay? So I can go in here, look at this session. Let's see, okay, well, Sarah's talking about the gameplay, so I'm gonna tag that as gameplay. Okay, she said she's played it for a lot of hours, but haven't been able to complete the game. That's a little bit, maybe negative, okay? Let's see. All right, and here's my moderator comments. I asked him to return the discussion back to the trailer, specifically the music selection. Brandon here said it was very upbeat. Okay, great. And Dan here is, he said it's awesome. Okay, so maybe want to private message Dan. Okay, so very simple, really easy to use, really easy to engage and continue the discussion, get people back on track. Maybe I mute Cappy, but then I send them a message and say, hey, man, why don't you tone it down a little bit? We're trying to run a session here, right? So just some cool things to point out there and show you that really live and, in the flesh. And just to walk through that again, private messaging gives you full control with the respondents. We can tag the responses for data collection, and we can filter participant responses. And one thing I want to point out too, as we continue to grow this particular product and this tool, there's more things that we're going to be doing in the future as a multimedia tool set, the ability to engage in polls and do heat mapping on those images that we push up there, and and later on, as we continue to scale this up as well too, we'll be doing some sentiment analysis on the chat data that comes out. So we're just getting started on this, and everyone is already getting some really great benefits. We're getting great feedback, and I've been appreciating working with Readily to develop this and continue to take it further. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Kara for our Q&A.
It looks like we've got some pretty cool questions here that have been brought up. I've got one from Sherry, who asks, let's see, how do you prove credentials for online respondents? Let me unmute Redley and Jim here, and maybe they can help answer that question. Okay, guys, so what do you think? How do you prove credentials for online respondents?
I'll speak about that, and perhaps the other members can dive in. John, perhaps. When it comes to online surveys, in our system database, we have unique key IDs for these respondents. These are part of our panel members. They've been vetted as far as when they were recruited. These are individuals who are double opt-in into the panel. So by the time they make it to the chat board, we already know who they are. Now, nothing is 100% foolproof, obviously, but we know these individuals, who they are when they're taking the survey at the point of registration. Everything, we have what you call a primary key, which is a unique ID identifier, such as the email address. So there's a lot of checks and balances that are in play before they get to that point. Now, this is the real world. If someone were to lie about something, and that's going to be your plus or minus, 1%, something to that effect. And I think it's up to the researcher, him or herself, to really design intelligent questionnaires so that, if you're talking to an IT decision maker and your survey is about servers, that you ask certain key questions to determine if that person is real or not. But nothing is going to be 100% foolproof. But so far, we haven't had, our clients have been very satisfied with the groups that we've run so far, and the individuals in those groups seems to be very knowledgeable of the subject matter.
Okay.
And you can You can get into a problem when you're doing on face-to-face focus groups. I think you have somewhat of the same problem, particularly if you're doing them in smaller communities. We did a gambling referendum in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we were recruiting several focus groups, and word got out that we were doing focus groups, and the opposition found out where they were and literally tried to crash them. Try to get their people or try to substitute their people in for the person who had been recruited. So we can see
Wow, that's an interesting point, Jim.
Yeah, so you can have the same or worse problem with face-to-face group.
Good point.
Interesting. Stephen here is asking, what incentives do you use to actually attract online participants?
Yeah, I'll take that one on. What we like to do, and Red Lead's built up, a healthy research panel and community, an online community, and we have many clients that have created their own communities, really pulling away from having to spend a lot of money trying to either buy sample or, do phone book recruiting to find people for sessions, really grooming up an online community, and that's another thing that keeps it healthy, and you know these people and you have this profile information and you've interacted with them long enough, they're not fake or phony. So because we're, continuing with the online environment, what we like to offer is online currency via gift cards, and our system is able to allocate points and allocate rewards in a click of the button. So after someone participates in a session and we verify that they've participated, we can allocate them the points so they can redeem the reward that they want, and that's a simple click. They select their reward, whether it's an Amazon gift card, a virtual Visa, etc. We have a very robust catalog, so we really believe in the online currency. But obviously, when we're working from different clients, we may need to customize that and use maybe some coupons that they're doing. Maybe there's some exclusive content that they want to offer up. Really the sky is the limit. And we found that with respondents, it works. They love the Amazon card or the iTunes card, and I personally who have worked with respondents, in the face-to-face groups, and we've given them maybe $100 or $75 to come in for a session. I've seen the equivalent work just as well in the online currency via the gift card. So, Bradley, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just one small item. Even when we talk about online currency, and sometimes, John, we use a point system. I want to make sure that our audience understand that the point system is equivalent to a dollar value. So it's not necessarily a gimmicky reward. It does, if it's 500 points, it's equivalent to whatever that denomination you choose. And it could be 500 equals $500. So in the case where we're conducting a study with a very low incidence group, if that person is receiving $250 for their participation, so that currency that we're offering in the form of reward would have to be equivalent to $250.
Great. So that's how it's incentives, but it's also how these participants are getting paid for contributing to the survey. Yeah.
Correct.
So here's another good question, is there a limit to the number of participants that I can have in an online focus group?
I'll take this one based on my experience, and maybe JJ, John, if you want to add to that one, you can. But as far as limit, it depends on the moderator. Obviously, even Jim, you can chime in there as well. You can have a group as big as you want, but the reality is the reality. Typically, we try to keep groups to about something that's manageable, about 10 individuals per session. The beauty with online focus groups is that you can have multiple sessions back to back. If you wanted to break the groups, you can have that 10 o'clock group and take a little break, and that 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock group or whatever that might be. You don't need to have 60 individuals. As a moderator, you need to understand what you're dealing with, because you're going to have about 10 individuals typing. Some of them are faster typists than others. Some of them may not be typing what you like. You're going to have to moderate it in terms of even, disciplining individuals. Like John was displaying earlier. You may have to kick somebody out, mute somebody, and so forth. So you have to manage that time or manage that group. But to
Right.
make a long story short, I wouldn't go beyond 10 individuals. But I've seen a group with 20.
Yeah, but one of the things when you're working under a time limit, and once again, the purpose of a focus, the qualitative, is to get deep into what people are thinking. So you've got to have enough time that you get information from each individual, that they're not just sitting there, not typing, not giving you any information. So yeah, if you get much more than 10, I think it would become unwieldy, and you're really defeating the purpose of getting qualitative data versus quantitative data.
So Jim, even in face-to-face, you typically wouldn't do more than 10, right?
Right. I don't. We just try not to. It's just not enough time
Correct.
to really get in. It's too easy for people to hide.
Well, kind of along those same lines, Brad is asking, can I split the groups like one would do in an in-person focus group? So can you split them when they're online?
I think splitting may imply here just having multiple sessions. That's kind of what I'm thinking. In the case of face-to-face, that's kind of what I'm thinking myself. In the case of face-to-face, let me ask Jim this question. When you split, how does that typically work? Do you split with two moderators, or do you split with different times?
Both, usually. I mean, we have done simultaneous focus groups with one moderator in one room and one in another. But these were like mock trials that lasted all day, which we had to pay people a lot of money to do, and we wanted to get them done in a day. But yeah, usually you just split. I mean, it sounds like multiple groups. I mean, if you're going to split the group, you just need two groups.
Right. Yeah. So splitting here to me implies you need multiple groups. And in the case of online, that's definitely doable. You can have concurrent groups. Just you're going to have different users. That's all.
Okay, here's an interesting question that Luke brings up. Is there a client view option? The clients I work with like to view the in-person focus groups.
Not really clear as far as the client view. I don't know if John has anything to add in that. I know there's a moderator view, and within the moderator view, if you talk about if it means having a separate login for the client, that's all doable as well. John, am I on the right track here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What Qualstrom has is there's three different views and three different links. There's one that goes out to the respondents, which is the respondent view, and one is the moderator view, obviously, where they come in and they get their tool set. And those are the ones we focused on. Today, and then the third view is the client view. Given that we try to mimic what's going on in the real world with focus groups, and obviously a lot of times clients like to be able to peer in. A lot of times they'll do that via some streaming tool that streams the group or whatever. So in the client view, what they get is access, to see the session what's taking place, but also they can private message directly to the moderator so that they can have a conversation back and forth with the moderator. They don't have access to conversate with the participants, obviously, but those are the three views.
Okay, let's see. Vanessa has a more of a sample question here, but she's saying, is it possible to recruit a fairly narrow audience? Let's say high school guidance counselors in Washington State.
Yeah, obviously, that's if anything, that's what we specialize in. I don't know if Vanessa, and this is not a sales pitch. I don't know if Vanessa is using the survey analytics platform, but if she was, it would make her life easier. And I apologize for this. And so yeah, I mean, from a sampling standpoint, we have the capability to do that, and that doesn't seem like it's one of those one-legged chihuahua as far as the incident. So if we definitely can do that, something like that.
Okay, and let's see. Let's ask one more question here. Let's see. Do participants need some special training, or do they have to download the tool to access the online focus group? That's coming from John here. So any of you guys can take that.
Yeah, I'll take that one on. Yeah, as I mentioned, for the respondents, it's just a URL. They simply need to pull up, the browser, rather it's Safari, Firefox, Chrome, or, they could just simply, or i.e. they just pull up the browser, type in the URL, put in their name, email address, and for the session, and they're in. It's easy as that, and then they start discussing away via their keyboard, and looking at the content that's in the whiteboard, etc. So there's no huge learning curve in this. It's what most people have already been doing with browsing the web, or interacting with all of the crazy mobile communication devices we have now that are essentially just typing away.
John, I'm going to have a question here. You were earlier demonstrating tagging. How does that? And I thought it was really cool. How does that work on the back end?
Yeah, it's really cool on the back end, because now when you get your roll up of the discussion of the groups, as I mentioned, you get the per member, you get their profile information, but you also get each of their if you've put tags, you get the tags that you've placed for those, so you can start using those. Honestly, I look at it for the coding and editing method too of these. Just like when you think about dealing with open ends, right? And the cool part about that too is that we have a mechanism too that we're going to be adding to this in Q3, which is going to be auto tagging, so that you can set up your tags and have the system go through and auto tag the conversation for you. So really, really, really cool.
Okay. I have one last one, Kara. Sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier, and this one goes out to Jim. And we talk about costs and how efficient it is to do it online. Jim, can you give us like a ballpark figure in terms of how much it would cost for running a face-to-face group if you go out, I don't know, 20 miles into the suburbs or something where you're looking for a certain type of audience, if you factor, all the elements that's needed to run a face-to-face group?
Yeah, our clients will be paying a minimum of $8,000. It's gotten up now where I know in our industry we're looking at firms charging as much as $15,000 to do a focus group. That's one group.
So that's one group of 10.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that's really general audience. I mean, if you're going to specialized audience, it will go up from there.
Okay. So one group of 10 of Gen Pop. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Are there any fees, any other fees? Because earlier you mentioned something like hotel and so forth and so on.
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends. Well, if we're doing them, our firm, we of course would mark up a fee, and also you would have all the travel expenses. I mean, if we're doing a statewide campaign in Louisiana and we have to run focus groups in Lake Charles, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, we're on the road 4 or 5 days, which is not fun for us, and we get paid for that time. Right, and so your costs start mounting as you start trying to get any complexity to it.
Okay.
Yeah, right to that. I used to, for just the room alone, a room charge for a day for me used to be $5,000, right? That's not including the recruiting, so.
And you have to feed them.
Yeah, that too. So don't forget
which is never cheap.
All the catering costs as well.
Yeah, it's the mounting cost of this stuff. It's almost equivalent to the mounting cost of trying to do a phone poll. It's just, it's going to take, it's going to mean that only the most wealthiest clients are going to do it, because if you're a market research firm, you've got to have something that is affordable for your clients to do if they're going to do research. If not, they're going to just, an ad agency will grab off and say, we'll do it the best we can by what we creatively think, even though we prefer research. There's a limit to price of what everybody's going to be willing to pay in these things. And I think the other thing we're seeing is that there's more and more of the facilities going out of business and not existing. So with fewer facilities, that means the prices are going to go up.
Okay, that's good. So the next one, and I mentioned that earlier, is I know, online research took a while for people to adopt it and accept it, as something that's real. Do these people take surveys and so forth and so on? And right now, it's the dominant data collection mode of choice, right? In your space, Jim, I know pollsters typically prefer, to conduct their polls via telephone or other methods. And having spoken to you for a few times, there are a lot of arm bending that you had to do to conduct, your polls online. How different was the data? Two questions. How different was the data in comparison to the national average or the state or congressional district research you conducted? And B, do you see some similarities here with regards to online focus group and online surveys when you were making that transition? Because I think you've done like 200 surveys in the past year here.
Yeah. The online, one of the early things we did when we started working with survey analytics is we conducted a comparison of we did half the poll on telephone, half online in the state of Kansas. And what we found was really interesting. First of all, the online survey was a heck of a lot cheaper for us to conduct, which was good. But we went in and did an analysis of the response by age group, by political party, and by gender. And what we found is the people responding to the issue who were 45 to 55 years old responded the same whether they responded on the telephone or on the internet. And that's because they were responding with their attitudes about what they felt, not to the medium of the presentation. Now, when you looked at the whole sample, when we went in and did 400 off a panel on the internet and 400 on the phone, what we found is the phone sample was hardly skewed toward older people. While we did get some younger people, it was not at all representative of the population. And I'm always amazed at, quite frankly, how accurately, when we do statewide stuff and we look at whether we're looking at voters or consumers, how well the internet panels now do at representing the population. And we have the same ability we used to with telephones, where we'd look at the sample part of the way through and say we need some of this, some more men, so let's cut down the women, and we can adjust the sample as we go. So you have that flexibility too. So at this point, I saw a poll not too long ago from a highly reputable pollster who had a poll of voters in Florida, and only 8% of the entire sample was under 35 years old. And I'm going like, that's just not right. That's just not even close. And so you can't do that. And I think this is going to happen. I mean, people communicate over the internet. They use technology to communicate. I mean, we think about it at my age with our grandchild who lives in Chicago. We do FaceTime with them. They see us. It's very normal for us to communicate using computers. And I think this is going to be the norm because, once again, I think the costs are going to go out the roof for in-person focus groups. As the generation who is in charge of businesses now is a computer generation. When I say that, I'm talking about people in their 40s who are moving up into decision-making positions in most companies. Were raised with computers. They're not afraid of computers. They're not 65 years old making these decisions. And even if they are, the fastest growing internet users are over 65. So I just don't see this kind of traditional kind of research lasting. And I think we'll figure out how to do stuff like we'll get 10 people and send them a case of or a six-pack of a new beer and say, drink this over the next week and we're going to talk about it. I think that kind of stuff will happen because it's got to. It's just got to.
Yep. Well, that's a great point to end on, Jim. Thanks. Okay. So, okay, guys, I think that's gonna wrap up our Q&A session. We went over just by a few minutes, but so we do have some other questions I see that we didn't get a chance to get to, but we will be posting answers to those questions on our blog tomorrow morning. So be sure to check back at blog.surveyanalytics.com. And we'll also be posting a video replay and a slide presentation of the webinar. Thanks, guys. It was great. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close off. And thanks for everybody joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara.